SwayamPrabha. Digital India. Educated India.
One of the important features of digital literature, digital communication is that the content can also be user generated, or in Web 2.0 content is user generated, though the user does not have the say over the content. Rarely does, even in the case of print, as we have seen, the author rarely has a say over the content beyond a point. Once the author has sort of sold the copyright or signed off the copyright to the publisher, the author only retains a moral right and no commercial right. Whereas in the case of the digital media platforms, especially the social media where there is user generated content, if you read some of the terms and conditions that users are required to sign when one is registering for a particular service, if you read them closely, then you find that there is very little right that the user actually has over the way that particular content is presented, to whom it is presented, and how it is presented. Only this morning I was reading about a particular app which sort of has gone viral in the on the internet, on the social media. This is an app that sort of shows, if you hold it before your face, before yourself, and take a selfie, it will show you what you are going to look like when you are very old. And so someone sort of posted, someone looked at the agreement, the user agreement very closely, and there it says that that particular app now has the right to do whatever with that image, to sort of give it over to anybody for advertisement, for whatever purposes, and even include personal information in that, and that would be absolutely legal, because you have agreed to the terms and conditions to the app as it is. And most of us rarely actually take these agreements seriously. There are millions and millions of users of these various content sharing and messaging groups and platforms. And what we are going to study today is are some of the political implications of the way these sort of this content is produced, the platform in which it is produced. So we had earlier discussed that the point about the digital media, the digital communication, is that the genre of communication is fixed by the platform. So you have a particular way of writing, particular way of operating for Facebook, another way of operating for Twitter, another way of operating for let's say WhatsApp, and usually you have to reframe the content if you are going to share it across the platforms, and the rules are set by the platform owner. Whereas in the case of print, usually across newspapers, articles would by and large be the same. There would be some stylistic, you can say some stylistic differences, but no formal differences that there would be. And this has great implications, because one, the form is being defined by the platform provider, who also being the owner of the platform becomes the owner of all content, really has control over all content, is what I mean, and that has some serious political implications. So we are looking at this essay by Zeynep, by one particular portion of Zeynep Tufecki's book, wonderful book. Please go and read it, it's freely available, Twitter and Tear Gas. In this book, Zeynep Tufecki looks at certain political movements and how social media has been used in these political movements. Now, those of you who follow the role of social media for political movements would know that there was a point of time but around 2010-11 or indeed from 2008 and 9 when the internet became a very important resource through which people mobilized for political movements. The case in point may be that there were the Occupy Wall Street movement, which began with lots of bloggers and a lot of information and posters. Though that was not yet the age of social media, but already the blogosphere was taking over. The internet and emails helped people coordinate a lot of things when the Occupy was happening, how people are going to actually provide rations and also provide medical care and various other things is something that was organized through the internet. It became so internet became a very important resource for people to communicate. People did not have to depend on the larger communication media. They could have their own sources of information. In fact, this is actually true for all political movements. If anybody studies internationally, historically in the 20th century, various mass movements, if one goes back to, let us say, the movement, the unrest in the 1960s. 1968 was a very important year of student movements, as well as the movement against the Vietnam War. In each of those movements, lots of people come onto the streets and participate in exercises which actually threaten the government of the day, and it sometimes leads to very substantial changes, and we find that in each of these cases, the state media or even the media owned by the large corporates would not be interested in giving a voice to these movements, and instead the movements themselves form their own ways of passing information among each other, and theatre plays a very important role. Those of you who know about the Italian playwright Dario Fo would know that he created a play called The Accidental Death of an Anarchist, which actually was a play which was created during a protest movement, a sort of a mass movement against the arrests of certain journalists who exposed the killing of the custodial killing of an anarchist in Italy. And in order to sort of counter the official spin that was being provided by the media, the theatre groups, I mean Dario Fo and his colleagues, sort of enacted, performed certain episodes from the courtroom drama that was happening, and that sort of grew into a play, and the theatre then becomes an important source through which information is an alternative information is passed on to the people participating in the protest movement. That space is always required when groups of people who come out on the streets and try to force the powerful to change their ways. And in the present day, of course, what we find that other than theatre, we have the social media plays a very important role in that, and we also we talked about the Occupy Wall Street movement. We can also talk about the Arab Spring, this series of uprisings in across the Arab world, beginning from Egypt, where the regime of Hosni Mubarak was overturned. He was forced to demit office, and that sort of was a movement which many people found social media, Twitter, Facebook played very important role in mobilizing people. So the question really is that were these movements leaderless, was there an organization, or was it merely organized through social media? So can social media substitute the need for larger organizations? As we understand, in India, in the history of India, we had a very important organization led movement for independence. The Indian National Congress played a very important role. There were of course other actors who ideologically were opposed to the Indian National Congress, Subhash Chandra Bose, and also there were the communists who and larger revolutionary organizations in specifically in Bengal. There was the Gadar Party. There were these important organizations which articulated some of the demands for independence or the paths of independence. They may have been ideologically opposed to each other. Certainly, the Indian National Congress was the most important organization, and it is this organization that helped sort of bring together the kind of resources that could actually mobilize people and turn them out against the British to lead to significant political change. And I would also like to remind you about the point about the church and Martin Luther. You know how till the coming of print, it was the church which had the Roman Catholic Church, which had its network and could quell any rebellion that could be there in Europe by pulling resources from elsewhere. But with the coming of print, resources went into the hand of the rebels, and the church found itself difficult to defend that situation. So so print played a certain role in building organizations and countering traditional ecclesiastical organizations. But what we find is that with the Arab Spring and with some similar movements, there was a possibility that you had what seemed to be that there would be large masses of people who would come out on the streets because a message would go viral, and it becomes an outpouring of discontent, and then the government is unable to control it anymore, and this really is a leaderless, a kind of organizationless, what seems to be, which may not actually be true, but it seems to be that this kind of a movement is there. But Zeynep Tufecki, when she looks at her at this particular phenomena in her book, she is looking at a later sort of phenomena, where she is looking, her basic study is based on the movement in Turkey especially, and in other parts of the world as well, where we find that the governments have started to learn how to handle social media. They have studied the social media, and she looks at that phenomena, that governments which were finding themselves at receiving ends and not able to control public opinion and public mobilization on social media, they now have learned and put processes in place. And what is crucial here, what is crucial in Tufecki studies for us to understand, is that partnership between the state and that corporate media is what is enabling the government to sort of control the particular mobilizations. We will look at that a little closely. Let us see what Tufecki has to say. So she says that she finds what she uses, the term that she uses for these kind of protests are network protests which formulate through the social media. She finds relationship between network protests and the role of Sherpas to mountaineers. So he says that when people climb, there are mountaineers who climb the Everest or other mountains. There are Sherpas who are there who have a certain experience, who actually boost the performance of the mountaineers. They carry extra oxygen, they carry various additional food and other items with them till almost the base camp, or even beyond that in certain cases, and that sort of gives a certain boost to the mountaineers. But and it would seem that though in actually in the case of by name, it would seem that it is the mountaineers who actually conquered the Everest, but but they wouldn't have been able to do it had this support not been there. But in a case where there are certain unforeseen situations, if there is a technical malfunctioning, or if there is a sudden storm, or if there is an avalanche, there is very little that the Sherpas can do. So and it would seem that mountaineers who cannot handle things on their own have with the help of Sherpas chewed more than they can bite, bitten more than they can chew, and so when it comes to crisis, they are no longer able to handle it. And she suggests that similar is the case of network protests, where the internet gives a certain boost, allows the movements to grow dramatically. So she sort of links organizations to the Sherpas. So whereas in, some mountaineers may not be fully equipped to actually or may not have a complete knowledge to be able to, or ability to conquer the Everest themselves, they get a boost from the presence of the Sherpas. But when the crisis comes, they are not able to manage it. So similarly, in the case of network protests, the internet and its interconnected character really makes the role of an organization minimal at the time of the build up. I mean, even if there is no prior organization or build up, the movements can grow dramatically. And what Tufecki says really is that this is something that should be seen really as an initiation of a movement and not the outcome. That is the right way to see it, because she suggests that the role of the organization is crucial, because she studies some of the crucial social movements before the social media. Says, for example, the civil rights movement in US in the 1950s and 60s. He says that what happened was that these movements, the build up is slow. People have to go campaign house to house, street to street, and build relationship, build their activists in every corner, and you building these relationships. And once this organization really builds up, once the organization really develops, after that edifice is difficult to sort of crush. It is very, very difficult, because you can shut down a printing press, or you can shut down a website, but what you cannot shut down is immediately all the members of a certain organization who continue to work possibly to revive the organization, and if it has been under attack in certain cases, and there are new leaderships that throw up. So the organization is one that really helps create the resilience in movements to survive and thrive in the long term. And they also create these but what is important is to create certain organizational structures which are which allow a certain collective decision making, and there may be formal or informal leadership structures. Now, one of the arguments that some people do make about these network protests is that they are non-hegemonic, that the organization is has a certain hierarchy, it is top down, and or whichever way it is, it can be regimented, and therefore the network protests are better because there is no hegemony, everybody is equal, but what is important here is that you need to, in the case of a movement, from time to time you have to decide, decide upon things, and in such situations kind of a collective decision making, certainly in the era before the internet, was not possible. In the middle of a movement to take a decision on the basis of the information from all or opinion from all participants are not there. So, the leadership decides, right. Whenever the review happens, periodically the organization reviews it itself. One can argue and say that in the era of the internet, it is possible to hold snap polls, but we do understand that is certainly to exist in a continuous referendum world can be dangerous, because methods of authentication of this kind of online polling are extremely questionable, and they are open to fraud, and therefore one needs to study the possibility of existing in a world of constant referendum. I do not think it is beyond question. Now, how did so when these movements came about, when these large movements came about, she says that there are two kinds of responses from from governments. So, one was a government kind of which did not understand networks, did not know how to handle these networks. This was the kind of early response to the social media mobilization phenomena, is that shoot at them and let the terror sort them out. So, basically there is so when the Gezi Park protests, when this protest in Tahrir Square happened in Egypt, one of the things that the Mubarak regime did was to let out a horde of camels on the streets. The people, a lot of people were injured, and a few died in the stampede, and sort of create that kind of terror. So, this was a government that did not understand the networks. Okay. But the second, and that is the later more studied response, the governments which were prepared to handle this, were responses from governments, what Tufecki says, less willing to engage in mass violence, or governments which have learnt the process, who have learned how to control the networked public sphere. So, these governments supporters, either members belonging to the ruling group or coalition, or government employs people who would one, monitor the internet, monitor the social media, keep tracking various people and groups and the online conversation, but more importantly to mediate, to sort of intervene in social media conversation, to actually dominate social media conversations through their particular efforts. And what they would do is to put certain misinformation, create doubts among the people, create confusion by trolling. Trolling is a certain behavior through which one sort of attacks verbally someone else whom you disagree with, and make it and all this process make it hard for ordinary people to figure out what is right and what is wrong. A lot of fake news goes into this. So, and we have seen that many governments across the world actually have this kind of a setup. It may be the government, or it could be the political organization which is in power, which could be running this kind of a force, and these are phenomenal forces which have the best which has the best technologies at their disposal. And certainly they also have what is called in real life, not only a virtual network, but also a in real life network. So when the two things come together, they sort of magnify, and they sort of become even stronger, and they really dominate the entire networked public sphere. And it would seem to an ordinary citizen who is engaged in social media that this is the only opinion, that the opinion supporting the government is the only opinion, and that sort of reduces the threat of mobilization through the social media. Tufecki looks at a specific instance of these kind of protests, and the Gezi Park protests from Istanbul is in 2013 is an important example that she looks at. And it would seem that this was something that was self-organized, and it was a horizontal participation. There's a rejection of it seemed that it was a rejection of formal politics, because political parties are corrupt, leaders are all corrupt, they have failed, so the people have taken over. It seemed that it is all democratic, and they were without formal hierarchies, or there was a certain ad hoc approach to organizing tasks. Volunteers ran everything: communal kitchens, libraries, clinics, the sharing economy helped by digital technologies, because they would know where is more food required, supplies would go there. Who needs a certain medicine, who someone else has that extra pack of that medicine, it comes. It would help patients to connect with doctors. So whenever someone is hit by the police, and the doctors would rush right there. They could also run informal hospitals right then and there. So that is something that was a possibility, but once the government steps in, the picture looks certainly different. But certainly this kind of social media force was not only used by democratic movements or protesters or rebels. They were also used by right-wing groups. The ISIS, the Islamic State, use of the social media space, the internet, is well known, and they use the social media to recruit volunteers from across the globe, sometimes create individual volunteers without direct without any direct contact with the parent organization, and know-how and training could be provided even through the social media, which is extremely dangerous for peace and democracy. There would be also the case of white supremacist groups in US and Europe. They were also used by of course by political organizations, which could be democratic and radical organizations, for example the Podemos in Spain and Syriza in Greece. We are not going to talk too much about that, about these particular movements or these particular organizations. You can read up on them on your own, but what says that the social media can however the effect of the social media, to explain the effect of the social media, she looks at a particular case of the Egyptian blogger who went by the name Honey. So he was running a very popular blog, immensely popular blog, which was extremely popular. and he used to criticize Hosni Mubarak, the leader of Egypt at that point of time. But then he was the government stepped in and arrested him, and he was put behind bars for 6 years. By the time he was running an immensely popular blog. It was a gauge of public opinion, popular opinion on Mubarak, and Mubarak, to control it, he just imprisoned the blogger, because the way the blog works is that there is this one person who writes and there are people who comment on it, and certain blogs get certain traction and they become major influencers. But by the time he served his prison sentence and he was released in or he was released in 2010, he found that there were no visitors for his blog anymore. So where's everybody? Because everybody had moved to Facebook. By then, Facebook had taken over. So that is the time when the social media really took over. And similar is the case with the Iranian blog father, as she says, Direction, who also realizes that the blogs no longer work because everybody has moved to the social media. And the way the social media really works and operates really is for us to understand is that social media, especially sites like Twitter, every media has its own mechanism of working. So if I can take the case of Twitter, people have to follow the Twitter and Facebook work very differently from each other. On Twitter, there would be people who will follow others. Mostly people, whenever they tweet, the tweets are all public. Anybody can see it. There is, of course, the option of protecting the tweet and saying that only certain people or groups of people can see my tweet. But that is not what the tradition is on Twitter. Twitter is public. Has a more public platform. In fact, you can access Twitter feed through multiple apps and other mechanisms. And in this kind of a situation, there are certain people who are influencers, those who have more number of followers. If they tweet out certain things, they have greater reach, right? Situation one can say is similar to the newspapers, which with the large readership, but the newspapers would be these large structures. Today, an activist can have very high numbers of followers. That is a possibility, or many people have become influencers on Instagram, for example. All right. Instagram also by and large can work in that kind of way. You can make your profile private or you can make it public. On Twitter, you have to organize the privacy settings on the basis of each single tweet. On Facebook also has a similar situation. Facebook also allows you to have your posts public or private or only for friends or friends of friends. But the practice by and large on Facebook is to actually share within certain groups or with your list of friends. Sometimes activists make their posts public so that various followers can watch it. So the two media sort of work very differently. Facebook works better in forms of groups. WhatsApp, on the other hand, works only in the form of groups. Principally, there is hardly any public communication on WhatsApp. So each of these have their own structures, as I said in the digital media. Each platform creates the form, creates the genre, and the role of these influencers is something that is important, right? So till the early 2000s, the first decade of 2000 till about 2007-8, when blogs were there, governments could relate to the blogs or react to the blogs almost in the similar way as they would have reacted to print, that is to arrest shut down the blog or arrest the person writing the blog. The number of bloggers with a great readership would have been much lesser. Whereas in social media, the same article can get the same tweet can get retweeted and go viral. Blogs never went viral. Blogs start going viral only after the coming of social media, right? I mean, when you write a blog and then you share it on social media, and then that goes viral. So this phenomena of going viral, and once something goes out there goes viral, after that to control it becomes far more difficult. So the way in which governments would have controlled the print or the blog would not be the way in which the governments can control social media, but they want to control nevertheless. We saw one way of trying to control is to actually participate and intervene in the debate, whereas till the case of the electronic media or the print media, governments would have intelligence cells who would sit and monitor the electronic media. The various governments would have complete departments who would watch various channels across the world, various channels that are being transmitted, and note exactly what is being written. We also looked at how the colonial government maintained a detailed register and a remarks columns to say what is being written, and if they find something happening which is dangerous or potentially dangerous, they could step in, arrest the person, or take necessary action, shut down the press, ban the book, and manage to take care of it. But that doesn't work, because in the case of the previous media, you had someone who created the content and others who read it. But now with the social media, you have everybody adding to the content, and that becomes much more difficult. So one of the things that the governments do is to also participate in the same debate and try to dominate it and try to channelize that to a pro-government sentiment. So that is one thing, but there are certain other things that also happen, and this time it happens with collaboration with the corporate media. Okay, the attempt to dominate the conversation is something that is merely something that is outside of you don't have to link up with the media platform to be able to participate or intervene in the debate, but governments also have access to the media platforms themselves. So for a moment, Zeynep Tufecki looks closely at some of the policies of these social media platforms, specifically case of Facebook. It says Facebook has this real names policy. Now, what is this real names policy? That those who have you cannot have a Facebook account in a fictitious name. You have to have your own name, and so sometimes people may, for various reasons, have more than one account, or not want to reveal their name. This is particularly the case of let us say LGBT people who do not want to reveal their identities. They want, yet they want to maintain a certain political stance. Activists and others, they may have various facets, like or it could be as innocent, like I could want one profile for work related activities, another profile for my friends, but Mark Zuckerberg said that having two identities for yourself is an example of lack of integrity. It takes a very high moral position. Zeynep Tufecki debunks that statement. In fact, she points out that Zuckerberg's pet dog has his own Facebook page. Now, is that a real person? I mean, sometimes Facebook would say, show us an iCard that this is your name, and we will let you have your account. Otherwise, the account gets locked. And so, but Tufecki says that there is a certain motive. There is a commercial motive behind this phase, the real names policy, is that without a traceable name, ads cannot be targeted at real people. So, if I have two accounts, one for my personal use and one for the official use, that may work for me to handle my work life balance, but it does not work for the advertiser, because whether I am in my official role or whether I am in my personal role, I am still the same buyer. I will take the decision on whether to buy that next phone or not, whether to buy the next car or not, or whether to buy the next vegetable or not, right. So, so the advertisers try to gather complete information about me, and this is not merely in terms of commercial advertisement. It has also got to do with political advertisement. With the Cambridge Analytica controversy, please, if you do not know about it, please go read up on Facebook and the Cambridge Analytica phenomena. Political ads are targeted at people, and what these social media platforms do, we talked about Google. What Google can do is through your search operations, through the sites that you visit, profile you, and they can have very detailed information about a person's psychological orientation, their political ideological positions, their relationships, whether they are cheating their partners, their health condition. Google certainly has that information, and if you have location finder on your phone, on a certain social media app, on even that platform also can possibly trace that, and with it gives you the facility of the location, but it can trace how fast you are walking, how much you are walking per day. I get an information saying from Google every month saying that I have spent 60 hours in a vehicle and I have walked 4 kilometers. Now, if this information, of course, this video is public and people may know, if this information goes out to an insurance company, then they might shut down my insurance, saying that you are not exercising enough. How does Google know? Because I do not carry my phone always with me, right. Google thinks that I am not walking, but I do not carry my phone all the time. I do not, because the phones actually emit harmful waves. So, it is advisable that you do not always carry it with you. So, right now when I am lecturing, the phone is not with me, it is lying somewhere there. And so, even if I am moving around, even if I am walking, if I am running, if I am swimming, Google thinks I am staying at one place. It does not have the correct information about me, but it thinks it does, and this information, if it gets passed on to third parties, and they and certainly advertisers use this information. As I said, advertisers target specific groups. I am a company which sells exercise equipment, so I want to target those people who hardly exercise, okay. And let us say Facebook or Google knows who are the ones who are stationary most of the time. Let us target them and work at them. So, and there are enough stories worldwide to say that how political advertisers actually target people's own prejudices to sort of switch their votes, to switch their ideas. These are so there is a link between commerce and politics, and that is a link that we have tried to hold together through this course, and how various media perform within this certain linkage between the state and the market. And this is something that Zeynep Tufecki's study also sort of also points out. She looks at a particular example and the implication of the real names policy. He says that there was a person, Ghonim, who was the administrator of an important Facebook page, which was We Are All Khalid Said. Who was Khalid Said? Khalid Said was a young man who was brutally tortured by the Egyptian police, and again, so we've seen how the Egyptian readers have moved from the blogosphere to the social media, and all become members of this Facebook page. We are all Khalid Zaid, and that has a great effect. It becomes a big important discussion group for the various anti Mubarak people, and becomes dangerous for the government. So the government contacts Facebook, and Facebook shuts down and deactivates the page, because they say that Ghonim was using a pseudonym. They use the real names policy. Ghonim is using a pseudonym, and it is shut down. There are of course many other people who would be using pseudonym, but Ghonims was targeted and shut down, clearly as in a sense that it was some kind of a understanding between the government and Facebook. In fact, just to point out, if you look at some of these organizations actually release transparency report. You can look up the latest Google transparency report. It will tell you how often certain governments, certain countries demand personal information on certain users from these companies, and how many times they are disclosing it. They do not say anything more than that, but the incidence of certain countries will tell you which are the countries which are sort of monitoring Facebook or social media, Google, a whole lot more. So a lot of people appealed and said please restore the page, and the page was not restored. Finally, an Egyptian woman from US allowed her real name to be used to reactivate that page, and she did it at great risk, because her family back in Egypt would have been at risk. Certainly when she came back, she would have been at risk. So that becomes a major question mark. But what this incident sort of shows is that relationship between the close nexus between the government and between authoritarian governments and Facebook is or these social media platforms are there, and because of the end user license, you do not really remain your own owner of your own content. Activists tend to keep posts public. They try to reach the maximum audiences, and Facebook does not have a dedicated team of its own. They use community policing to keep costs down. So the way they work is that if there is a certain post which is sensitive, if there is nudity, if there is obscenities in the post, they could remove it, but that is done when on request. So users will have to police. So Facebook not able. So unlike in print, where there would be a bunch of editors who would sit read through books, manuscripts, and newspaper articles and various things, suggest changes and sort of monitor for themselves. Of course, there would be other censors who would be looking at things, but the way Facebook operates is now the user base is more than 1 billion. It is very difficult to actually monitor what everybody is doing. The activity is huge. So most of these platforms, be it YouTube, be it Facebook or Twitter or whatever, they use community policing to keep costs down. People have to report. Now this becomes a tool in the hands of those who ideologically disagree with activists or others. They can motivatedly report against these kind of posts or activists, and this is the hardest hit. She says are the queer people, the LGBTQ group, and sometimes the Facebook's no vulgar names policy can be biased against names from different languages. People can have a certain name which can mean something else in other languages, and in most of these cases, these are at the back end operated by bots or machine learning algorithms. And these algorithms work on the knowledge. These algorithms are not, though they are machines, they do not have their own intelligence. The intelligence that gets into any of these artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms are the assumptions, the priorities, the political and cultural inclinations of the people who have written that program, and then that has a multiplier effect. So, what we saw in the case of electronic media is that, or in the case of other forms of media, that certain publishing houses or certain groups or certain studios or certain television channels have a greater say, have a greater reach across the world, particularly at movie studios from Hollywood have a greater influence on the world or world cinema than every other place. So, similarly here most of these companies are based out of the United States, and certain cultural biases that could be there in the programming could also percolate down. I am not saying that all programmers are from the carry that cultural bias. They certainly, these companies are very large and they have offices elsewhere across the world, but still one would say that the dominant sort of biases, the biases of the dominant groups keeps getting replicated within these algorithms, within the design of the algorithms. So, the point that I am trying to make is that whereas in print or in electronic media, we have to look at the biases of the filmmaker or the script or the proofread or the writer, author, poet. Here we do not look at the biases only of the person who is posting, making a certain post. You also have to go into the code, because in the digital media what is running at the back end is the code, the HTML, if you remember those lectures. So the writing of the code determines how the text behaves.